Weird thing happened. Weird thing happened. No sooner had I done my video on the NECA King Kong figures, and my amazement that they were actually available in a store up here in Canada, but I found another one! I found another one in the wild! Namely, I found this one! The Mezco King Kong of Skull Island figure at a local shop, tftoys.ca, just outside of Calgary here at the New Horizon Mall. Mind blown. So, riches galore for me to actually be able to find something in the store. Now, I did a little bit of wheeling and dealing. Because I'm not a huge fan of the Monsterverse, I actually sold off my Monsterverse Kong figures and plushie that I showed in the last video. Sold those off, and I sold off a Bandai Godzilla soft vinyl figure of mine I had no particular emotional attachment to. And that got me the money to be able to buy this, which is a fine addition to my collection. I'm kind of, curating my collection. I decided I want to focus on the 1933 King Kong because that's the one that I like. This one is not exactly based on the 1933, but I'll get into that. The box is fine enough. It's an illustration of the wall, from Joe DeVito, whose work is inspiring this particular figure. And I'll talk about that in a sec. So let's crack this open and have a look inside. And here we go. Here is Kong out of the box and looking pretty good. We see his accessories here. He's got the extra hands, almost identical to the NECA one, although the NECA one comes with 3 sets of hands. This Kong, Mezco Kong here, comes with 2 sets of hands, the open and the closed fists, as well as a single hand that holds the Fay Ray Andero figure right here, which I've installed on there, a little ball joint in the hands there, where you can attach that. Also comes with a second head, as does the NECA figure, and this pair of shackles, which are a little more elaborate than the NECA one. These ones actually open up. And they have this sort of rusted-looking paint application on there. The sculpting is actually better. I like the sculpting a little bit more than the NECA one. Because I made a weird complaint in my previous video about how there was too many joints on the NECA one. I may be the only person on Earth who complains about articulation. But this one, the joints that he does have, which are almost identical to the NECA ones, they're not as visible because they took the time and did the work to blend, to sculpt in the the fur around the joints, so that it's much less obvious that there's joints there for most of those joints than on the NECA figure. So I actually like that a bit more. The sculpting itself, I also like the hairier look is really nice. The face, though, it's obviously 1933 inspired, but it's not exactly a copy of the 1933 version. I don't think it gets it as well as the NECA one does, and there's a reason for that, which I'll get into momentarily. For the price point, that's the only part where I'm a little disappointed with this one, because the NECA ones I bought for $45 Canadian each. And, the one comes with the articulated Pteranodon, the articulated Spider Pit monster, and the weapon, the log, and also, 3 sets of hands, 2 heads. The other Kong from NECA comes with the sets of hands, the head, the shackles, the unarticulated shackles, and the entire biplane model. And it was cheaper by like $20 than this one, which I bought for $60 Canadian. So for that price point, I would have preferred to have more accessories with this one. I know there's the black and white version, which comes with the extra skull and bone and stuff. But haven't seen that around here yet. Don't know if I would bother to pick it up after getting this guy, and I'm not sure how much more they would charge for that one. I mean, the big advantage of this one, of course, is that it has the Andero figure, which was missing from the NECA sets. So I do appreciate that tremendously, though I don't regret buying this one. I do regret that it was expensive as it was for having as little accessories as it did. Why is it more expensive? Well, I think unlike the NECA figures, this one, they had to pay a licensing fee for. Like I said, this one is inspired by the 1933 version, but not exactly, because it's sort of 1933 by way of the art of Joe DeVito, who has been working with the Merian C. Cooper estate to produce an original series of Kong novels and art books, and that's what this is. That's what this figure is from here. He's from those stories. So let's just take a look at that. The story of King Kong's copyrights is a bit of a dog's breakfast. It begins, I guess, in 1932, because Hollywood hasn't ever really changed that much. They still, even 1933 as today, relied a lot on existing IP in order to sell movies, right? You think of the original Universal Studios Monsters franchise. You've got Dracula, Frankenstein, The Invisible Man, The Black Cat. All these movies based on pre-existing IP. Very original ones slipped in there. The Mummy was fairly original, based off some existing works, but nothing that they would credit. And granted, the movies themselves weren't, like faithful adaptations of the Poe works, whatever that they're based on. But still, it was a name we could recognize. So when Merian C. Cooper gets to RKO and he wants to make this idea for a movie, he has King Kong, they were hesitant because it wasn't an existing IP, it was an original idea. So Cooper commissioned a novelization of sort of the script, the story that he had up to that point, 1932. Work got started by Edgar Wallace, who was famous at the time, but the book itself was actually finished and written by Delos Lovelace. With the book published, then RKO was like, all right, we can go ahead with this movie, we can finish this thing off and do this. And they do, and they make the sequel in the same year, Son of Kong, and everything's tickety-boom, whatever. But get into the 1960s, and something happens. Merian C. Cooper becomes aware that he doesn't own Kong. He thought he owned Kong the entire time. Turns out that RKO thought they owned Kong and had been licensing Kong out to Toho Studios to make King Kong vs. Godzilla, to Rankin Bass to make the King Kong cartoon that also was adapted into King Kong Escapes in Japan, the Aurora model kit, all these different things. He's like, hold up, what's going on with this? So they have to figure that out. It gets complicated in the 70s with Dino De Laurentiis making the 1976 film version. Universal gets involved. It rears up again in the 80s when Universal goes up against Nintendo for having made Donkey Kong. Basically, how it all susses out in the end is that the original King Kong novelization is public domain. The copyright on that was never claimed, was never extended, so King Kong, the novelization, is public domain. But the publishing rights to King Kong reside with the Merian C. Cooper estate. The 1933 version, its rights, stuck with RKO, which is also now with Warner Brothers. The 2005 version, the two Japanese films, King Kong vs. Godzilla and King Kong Escapes, the American versions of those, also the theme park attractions and other various miscellaneous bits of Kong mythology belong to Universal. The 1976 version, its sequel, belonged to Dino De Laurentiis, and the MonsterVerse version, I believe, is with Legendary. So, yeah, a dog's breakfast of who actually owns Kong. And the answer is sort of nobody. If you want to do a thing, like a movie about a giant ape named Kong, you're welcome to. As far as I know, that is public domain. Nobody owns that. Although, if you want to use elements specific to a certain movie version, then you have to deal with the licensing for that. Well, Joe DeVito, Brad Strickland, works with the Merian C. Cooper estate to produce this original series of books and novels and things like that. They rewrite the original novel into a copyrightable version, and make this Kong, King of Skull Island book as both a prequel and a sequel to the original novel. So not the film version, and the likenesses in this book are not those of the actors. You can see here, special thanks to the Miriam C. Cooper estate, copyright 2004 DeVito Artworks. And what this book does is this follows the son of Carl Denham, the son he did not have in the movie. Because, of course, the movie version, the movie gets an epilogue in Son of Kong, a sequel released the same year as the original, and in Son of Kong. So it's hard to say it's a full movie of its own. It's a nice epilogue up until the very end point where they couldn't figure out how to end it, so they just... I don't want to give away spoilers, but they find a big dramatic way of ending it that is just like a Deus Ex Machina. Don't really care for that part, but Carl Denham does get a love interest in Son of Kong. This one, goes back to the novel, and especially the rewritten version of the novel by Brad Strickland and Joe DeVito. And this one, it's a fine. It's sort of, I would consider it more like official fanfic. It's licensed by the Cooper estate, so it has that air of officiality to it. But it's take it or leave it. It is what it is. It's an okay story. It actually reminded me a lot of Dinotopia, if you've ever seen that, seen those books. The art in it is fine. I like DeVito as an illustrator more than as a painter. But it's okay. It adds to the mythology of the novelization of King Kong. I prefer the Son of Kong as a sequel. I would have liked to have seen more films come out of that. Unfortunately, that never happened. But whatever. I'm also more of a visual, spatial person. I tend to prefer movies to books. I read at a glacial pace, just not because I can't read, but just because I'll read a chapter and then a month later read the next chapter. So this is what this Mezco Kong figure is actually based on, is this book and subsequent books made by Joe DeVito. And when you look on the box for the Mezco Kong, it says quite plainly that this is copyright DeVito Artworks. So there's a licensing fee involved in this one. Now, the NECA one, I'm not sure. I looked on the box. I did not see any licensing information for that particular figure. So probably why it's 1933 inspired, but not exactly 1933 one, because that's public domain. They're able to do one that was kind of vaguely King Kong, but not any specific version of it. This one is a specific version based on the works of Joe DeVito here. And why so many Kong figures? Well, the obvious answer, everybody wants to get their hand in on Godzilla vs. Kong. Kong's becoming a hot IP, kind of. So everybody wants to make their 7-inch adult collector figures. NECA, did get a license to do a Godzilla vs. Kong, but also decided, to fill out their Real Toys line and add a 1933-inspired Kong. And then Mezco also wanted to get involved and make their own adult collectible, and they went for sort of the next available license, which was the King Kong of Skull Island sort of IP franchise by Joe DeVito. It's a long, sordid tale of who actually owns Kong, which is sort of everybody and nobody. And keep in mind as well that in 2029, unless there's a copyright law extension, then even the 1933 version of Kong actually enters the public domain. So you can start using elements from that as well, and people could just unabashedly make figures based on it and not have to pay anybody to do it, which is fine by me. But for now, for toys, we can compare our figures here, and which one is better? Well, I don't. they're similar enough where you can compare them, but they're different enough that makes it difficult, right? Like I said, I don't like the jointiness of the NECA figure. I do like the sculpting as far as that goes on the Mezco figure. It hides those joints a little bit better, makes it look a little nicer, but I like the posability on the NECA figure, and I like that the NECA figure face captures the 1933 likeness really well, even if it's not technically supposed to be the 1933 version and non-copyright infringing version of it. So I like all of that. This one looks like it could actually have been taken from like a scan of the stop motion model, if it still existed or anything. The Mezco one, because it's based off of Joe DeVito's art, it's more cartoony. It's like an illustrator's, a cartoonist impression of the original stop motion model. But again, the sculpting on it I really like. I don't mind that it's a more cartoony take on it. I think that's fine. And I love that it comes with the Fay Wray figure. That's the one thing that I've been really itching for. It's missing from the NECA figures. With everything else they have, they don't have that. Even though this guy is missing a lot of those things that the NECA figures come with, it still has her, so that works out really nicely in my books. So I mean, I'm glad I got them all. I don't regret buying any of them. They're all going to look great in my collection, and the Mezco figure is a nice accessory. Not just for the 1933 version, but clearly this is inspired by, because it's got the Fay Wray figure and the shackles and everything. But also, the Joe DeVito book there behind me. It's an interesting little tidbit of Kong history, and so I'm glad to add this guy to my collection. Buy them both, buy neither, I don't really care. Those are just my thoughts. And yeah, thank you for joining me, and I'm going to have other Kong videos coming up. Not that my Kong videos are super popular, because Kong isn't the most popular franchise or anything, but it's a subject I'm enjoying talking about right now. So I'll be back with some other Kong videos with a few other little tidbits and things like that. So anyways, until then, thank you very much, and see you next time.